It's 1:38 a.m. Time for Octoberpod. This is your faithful horror host, Edward October. Our scary story will begin in a moment. Listen to me very carefully. We at Octoberpod don't ask you for much, but what we do ask, very urgently and very seriously, is to like and comment on our videos and subscribe to this YouTube channel. And bold individualists wherever you dwell can receive new video notifications by ringing the bell. It appeases unquiet spirits, which is the subject of this morning's tale, a true horror narrative of offerings and sacrifices and retail nightmares called God of the Gap, narrated by MJ McAddams, host of Humble Hauntings podcast.
Hola, Ed. ¿Cómo estás? This is Jessica in Orlando. I don't always see your new episodes when they drop, but I've been catching up on all the old ones on YouTube. I have a really good story for you, and I hope you like it, or are creeped out by it, or whatever. I was reminded of it while I was home for Thanksgiving, and mi abuelita asked if I was still working at the Gap. Actually, just to be clear, I've never worked at the Gap. I worked at a boutique next to the Gap, in my hometown, years ago. But abuelita's memory isn't what it used to be, and anyway, I knew what she meant. This little town I grew up in had a sort of historic downtown. The buildings were old, and the local chamber of commerce tried to make sure they were filled with cute shops and a bunch of Martha Stewart-looking cafes. They still have an awesome coffee shop that makes these unbelievable Nutella crepes for Sunday brunch. Anyway, that's the area where I worked. It was while I was finishing the coursework for my certification to teach K through 6th. The boutique was called Rosie's Rag Patch. It was owned by this sweet old Bolivian couple, Hector and Rosaria, and they ran the shop out of this creaky old Victorian house. They sold handmade jewelry and lots of this flowery old hippie lady fashion. I guess you could call it boho or shabby chic, but like the old lady version of that, for white people. I remember they had this silly billboard in town. It was a picture of some wide-eyed soccer mom type lady. She's holding a wrapped gift, and the caption says, "Please let it be from Rosie's Rag Patch." Anyway, I was hired on shortly after there was this big fire downtown. The fire started when lightning struck the house next door. That house burned down, and later a Gap was built on the lot, so Abuela was close. But the fire spread to Rosie's Rag Patch. There was a little bit of fire damage and a lot of water damage from where the firemen tried to put it out. So, where was I? Oh, okay. So they hired me, and I got there in June. They were in the process of doing demo work on the damaged rooms. The worst damage was in the old boiler room they had been using as a stock room. So they knocked down this moldy-ass drywall and ended up exposing some of the house's original brickwork. The brick wall was as old as the house itself. I think it was built right before the Civil War or right after, somewhere around there in the early 1800s. And the first thing anyone noticed was this painting. It looked old, too. Hector said the drywall had been up since the 1970s, but the painting could have easily been 100 years old. I snapped a picture of it and showed it to my old youth pastor, and he said it reminded him of the illustration of the devil in the Codex Gigas. You should do an Octoberpod about that someday. I would have scanned this picture and emailed it to you, but I don't have it anymore. You'll understand why I got rid of it later. Anyways, I got off track. So this painting on the brick was definitely a devil or a demon, or straight up Satan. And it made the thing in the Codex Gigas look downright cute and cuddly. It looked too well done to be graffiti, but too crude to be the work of a trained artist. Its head was like a goat or a ram with long curled horns. The horns had some kind of ribbed texture with sharp points. It had the torso of a man, a hairy man with a symbol of some kind tattooed on its chest. It had 3 arms on each side, all splayed out, and each hand was either holding something like a dagger or a cup or a scale, or doing some weird gesture. Kind of like an esoteric sign language, I guess. It had 2 legs. No one could make out if the legs were supposed to be from a hooved mammal or a dragon with heavy scales. It had 3 serpents hanging from its mouth like tongues. But the thing I remember the most, the thing I'll always remember, are the eyes. They were so big and expressive, and the only part of the image that used the color white, so the whites of these huge, staring eyes seemed to glow against the dark brick and the muddy-looking paint used for the rest of the image. Some of the girls in the store made up a game. You stare into the eyes for a certain period of time, like a full minute. And if you close your eyes, you could still see the whites of its eyes. Like one of those optical illusions they have in kids' activity books or something. I did it once, but I wish I hadn't. It kinda burned the eyes into my memory. Another girl who worked at the store did it, and she freaked the hell out. She locked eyes with the thing for a minute, like the game said to. There was another girl, Lupe, timing her and giggling the whole time. When the minute was up, she closed her eyes. We expected her to say, "Whoa, that's freaky," or something like that. Like what we all would have said. But no. The girl kept her eyes closed for a long time. Then she started sobbing and running around the room like she was blind. She still had her eyes clenched shut. When she opened them, her eyeballs were solid red, like she had pink eye or she had just been punched. She kept sobbing and ran to the bathroom. We heard her in there barfing for like 20 minutes or something. Lupe started a rumor that the girl was bulimic. Lupe was such a bitch. It was around that time that we started urging the owners to hurry up and put up the new drywall. Hector eventually covered it up with a sheet or something, but Miss Rosie kept going behind his back and taking the sheet down. Someone asked Miss Rosie why she wanted it uncovered, and she said that she believed the devil was a god who watched over the house, and we must treat it with respect and keep it happy. He's the one who saved the store from the lightning strike in the fire, while the other one next door burned down, she would say. Once she said she suspected that Nilo, that's what she started calling it, may have conjured the lightning to ensure his face would be uncovered. Hector seemed embarrassed by his wife's ramblings. He said that Miss Rosie had a cousin who worked in a silver mine in Bolivia. It's very dangerous work, and the miners believe that a devil or a god of the mountain controls their fates, especially if there's a cave-in or toxic fumes. The miners have a statue of a devil at the entrance to each mine. They leave offerings at its feet to win its favor and protect themselves from danger. Hector said that the devil on the wall must surely remind Rosie of her cousin. And just like one of those miners, Rosie began greeting Nilo and leaving offerings for it. Usually it was flowers that she placed at Nilo's feet. Nilo preferred carnations, she said. Miss Rosie would do them all up in a nice vase and everything, and just leave them there until they wilted and started to rot. Whenever they got too stinky, Hector or somebody would throw them out. But sometimes, the same flowers sat untouched for weeks and weeks. One time, Miss Rosie baked a pan de los muertos and left it as an offering. It got moldy pretty quick, and everyone was afraid it would draw mice or other pests. I'm going to tell you this next part as quickly as I can, because I'll start to freak out if I stop to think about it too long. There was this week when the store was very slow. For anyone who's ever worked at a mom and pop business, you know this can be a really stressful time. Hector and Rosie kept hoping that someone would come in and make a big purchase so that they could buy groceries that week. I never knew if they were exaggerating or not, but that's something I still wonder about. So, Miss Rosie had a lot of time on her hands and decided to make a big offering to Nilo. She came in one morning with a pot of this stuff that was about the color of fresh motor oil. She took a pastry brush and started painting the wall with it, all over Nilo's hands and feet, and then she lit a candle. It was a lavender scented candle that they sold at the store, and placed it against the wall. All of us girls working that day asked her about it. Miss Rosie told us there was a rabbit that had been eating all the cilantro she had planted in her garden. She said she waited for it to come back and shot it. Before she butchered it for a stew, she said she bled it out in a pot and left the blood as an offering for Nilo. And guess what? That same afternoon, this lady came in and bought a $300 coat and ordered a bunch of jewelry for the bridesmaids to wear at their daughter's wedding. Miss Rosie was convinced that her blood offering had pleased Nilo. Well, my coworker Lupe didn't approve at all. She may have been kind of a catty bitch, but she was very religious. Well, she wasn't religious enough to stop the crow game with Nilo's eyes after the other girl freaked out, but she was religious enough to feel as though making blood sacrifices to it was somehow crossing a line. Lupe lost her shit and kinda cussed out Miss Rosie and stormed out without finishing her shift. I'm surprised Hector and Rosie didn't fire her. She came back to work the next day. She was on the schedule. But she acted very weird and mopey. Now, I wasn't around to see what happened, but apparently, Lupe was working in the store by herself one day. Hector and Rosie were off running errands, and business was so slow at the rag patch that they sent the other girl home for the day. Allegedly, Lupe closed up shop early and snuck into Nilo's room. She threw all Miss Rosie's offerings in the dumpster, scrubbed the blood off the wall, and painted over Nilo with a thick layer of white paint. Then she pasted pages from a King James Bible all over the walls, kinda like wallpaper. I always wanted to know what Miss Rosie would have said to Lupe when she found out. But as it turns out, Miss Rosie never got a chance to confront her. Lupe never made it home that night. It started raining when she left the store. As she was driving past an exit ramp to the interstate, a cement truck hauling about 15 tons of cement came down the ramp too fast and ran into the cross traffic. It plowed into Lupe's car, and she died instantly. Now, I wasn't there to see it, but the rumor was the next morning, all the Bible pages had fallen off the wall. As though the glue Lupe had used wasn't strong enough. But not just a page here or there. Every last page. And even though Lupe had painted over Nilo with several fresh coats, the image of Nilo managed to bleed right through it. Its eyes were just as piercing as always. Needless to say, shit had gotten too freaky for me, and I got another gig until I could land the teaching job I wanted. I never found out what happened to Hector and Rosy after I left, but I do know that the store, or rather the house it was in, went up for market a few months later. No one ever bought it though, because that summer a heavy storm hit downtown and lightning struck it, and Rosie's rag patch burned to the ground. I can't imagine what would have happened if I stayed longer. As soon as Lupe died, I started having these nightmares about Nilo. I'd see his eyes staring out at me in the darkness as I slept. In fact, I started sleeping with the lights on after that. There's more I could tell you, but I dare not dwell on any more of the details. I'm gonna have to stay up all night anyway, because I know Nilo will haunt my dreams if I don't. I guess that's the sacrifice I have to make.
A whisper in the dark. The sound of footsteps when you're home alone. A figure, all in white, vanishes as you approach them. For as long as humans have roamed the earth, we have been obsessed with spirits. Ghosts are weaved into the very fabric of our cultures, haunting our traditions, stories, and superstitions. Hello. My name is MJ McAddams, part-time shadow person, full-time supernatural seeker. Welcome to Humble Hauntings, where the lovers of the unknown can pull up a seat and make themselves at home. I invite you to join me on a journey that will take us all over the globe and throughout history, exploring the supernatural places and entities that fill us with both fear and curiosity. Everywhere you look, you'll find that the paranormal have made a home in our society and in our minds. Which begs the question, do ghosts haunt us? Or do we haunt them? After all, home is where the haunt is.
On the next Octoberpod, H.P. Lovecraft. You have been streaming Octoberpod. Octoberpod was produced, edited, and directed by Edward October. Logo and banner graphics by Jessica Good. Edward October illustrations based upon an original character design by Nic Calavera. Select music and effects cues courtesy of freesound.org. The man who spoke to you was Mr. Edward October.